Well, hello. Well, hello.
Mm-hmm.
well,
Well,
hello.
hello.
Welcome
Are
back.
you are you are you in the bunker now? Is it the official full pandemic show?
That's
You're
right.
masked up for yourself.
Well, that's right. Full metal JN. What's going on? Well, hello. That's the official greeting. How are you guys? Welcome back to Pencil to Pencil. I am your internet best friend and co-host of your favorite pandemic podcast, Jamar Nicholas, coming back to you again on a Saturday evening. Hello, hope everybody's well. I am joined by the hip by my best bud and modern master of comic books, Mike Manley. Say hey, Mike.
Hi, best hip, my hippie bud.
Welcome
I
back.
smelled some hippies when was downtown today. People were burning trees all over. It was crazy.
Well, it seems like the big thing this weekend is that Pennsylvania, or at least Philly, I don't know how this works, has reinstated dining indoors, Mike. So there are a lot of people out
Yeah. Well, I think they also increased the capacity
there.
to 50% or something like that, because I think it was at 25%.
Yeah. hmm
So, but yeah,
Yeah,
but
there are
we
a
went
lot.
down because today was the official opening of the annual student exhibition. So Mimi and Liang had their walls up,
hmm
and so we went down, and like driving into the city, multiple cars were burning leaves, and you could just smell it because they had the windows down.
Yeah.
And then when we got into the parking structure, got into the elevator, somebody was lighting up. And then I was sitting outside for a little while waiting for them to come out. More. I was had a contact high like all day. I could just, I'm him to buy anything, get that sense of million.
It's funny. It's like when I was in Oakland and like I got out of the car service and it's just the whole the whole place smelled like weed.
Maybe that's what the satellite picture I just posted on my Facebook of the fires is just like huge blunts burning in California.
Oh, that's amazing. Welcome back to Pencil to Pencil. Um, I am Jamar. I'm here with Mike, and we're having one of our special every couple of episodes comic book boot camps again, comic art boot camps, Mike. I know I'm excited. And hold on, I got the graphic boot camp.
Ooh, ooh! Just leave that up.
Boot
That's
camp.
it. You'll just learn from that.
Yeah, I love it. I'm really excited tonight. That Mike and I are just going to chop it up real lovely and talk about some really interesting art tips, hacks, and techniques you might be able to learn tonight. Um, and I really enjoy these episodes, Mike. We used to call these when we didn't have a guest on. We used to call these palate cleansers. So imagine you were somehow in a candle store, and in the candle stores, there's always a little can of coffee beans laying out. So
In a
after
candle store?
yeah, so after I've been in some candle stores. So after you
Mm.
keep smelling candles, hey,
Then you smell coffee. Then you smell coffee
yeah, you put your nose up to the coffee beans, and it resets your nose. It resets your palate.
for the
So
next Sting video.
yeah,
You know how many candles you need for your next Sting video.
that's right. When we are in between guests, we used to call these palate cleansers, but instead of us just kind of like kicking the ball back and forth, we've decided to funnel our energies into doing a little art tutorial, sharing uh, uh, some of our favorite artists from the past, and taking your viewer questions. If you're watching us live on YouTube, well, hello. If you're watching us live on Facebook, well, hello. Um, I remember I cannot see you, so if you want to say hi, put in a comment, chat with other people in the room, type it to the comments. And if your question feels like it adds some weight or a buoyancy to what we're talking about, I'll put it on the screen. So, Mike, it's funny. JRD in the chat asked, "Was it bad enough, Mike, that you crave Gino's cheesesteaks?"
No.
Yeah, that's one of the.
I don't know where I would get a cheesesteak in the city now, because most of the cheesesteaks in the city are expensive and overrated. It's like pizza. Like, the city's lousy with pizza and it's lousy with cheesesteaks, and you got people arguing, oh, Tony Luke's or this guy or whatever, Lee's, whatever. We're the original, but neither one of those places is very good. To be honest, you know what
We're
I
gonna
mean?
lose our sponsorship.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. The guy that used to run the deli down the street from me, Jimmy's, years ago, he had the best cheesesteak. In fact, I remember the first cheesesteak I had when I moved to Philly, I think, was a Pat's cheesesteak.
I'm sorry.
It was just awful.
Yeah, well,
my dog wouldn't eat it. It was just like, it was like eating a hockey puck.
Well, people who are from out of town have it drilled into their heads that Pat's and Gino's in South Philly are the premier cheesesteak spots. But any local will tell you that you only go there under extreme circumstances of duress.
Yeah, you probably get a better cheesesteak at Wawa.
But yeah,
just get some steakums.
But one of the coolest things about the town is you can probably get a good, like you said, a really amazing steak at your local mom and pop pizza takeout joint, right? The local neighborhood spot.
They're usually I think they're actually better. I think when you go to those touristy trap places, it's for anything. It's like when you go to Baltimore, everybody says, "Oh, go to what is it, Phillips or one of the touristy trap places."
Yeah.
If you always go during the convention, they're always slammed, right? They never have enough staff.
Mm-hmm.
That's not when you're going to get a quality meal.
No. One of my favorite memories is it was me and my buddy Ben Harvey. If you don't follow Ben Harvey, please follow him. His Instagram is amazing, full of watercolor illustrations. And we had taken the bus down together from Philly to go to the Javits for New York Comic Con. And the show was over. And this might have been, ever since New York Comic Con's been going on, the Javits has just been overrun with bodies. I remember, was it the first or second year, Mike? The fire marshal almost shut the thing down because there were too many people in it.
Because of the stench.
Oh, you're a rare form tonight. So ever since then, it's been like a labor to kind of maneuver in that space. But we were heading out of town. It must have been Sunday night after the show. And we were waiting for the Bolt bus in front of the TikTok Diner on 34th. And there was a Five Guys across the street.
And you smelled that grease cooking.
Wait a minute. It's like 6 o'clock, whatever the show's over. We're headed down to the TikTok to wait for the bus. We're like, yo, you want to grab a burger? We go in Five Guys. It looked like the end of Mad Max. Like they ran through that place.
Guy with a China doll face sitting there waiting for a hamburger.
I took a picture. I don't know where it is. This is years ago. There was like 3 rows of soda dispensers, because there's a lot of people going to Five Guys. Every one of them was out of order. The whole thing was out of order. There was still a line. There was, for some reason, a table full of Enchantress cosplayers sitting around a table. I don't know if it was a spell or it was actually 5 girls dressed like Enchantress eating burgers.
And there was one girl, and she had just hypnotized you. She saw 5 hamburgers.
And at the front of the line was the clerk, who just looked like gobsmacked, like he went through war. His the blood was drained out of his face, and he was looking around for help. And somebody came from the back, was like, "Yo, tell him we ain't got no more cheese. We ain't got no more cheese." They just ran through the Five Guys. But yeah, so that's a thing, trying to get a good meal after a major con. is not the easiest thing. So you kind of either have to get in an Uber and leave the area, or have really good open table reservations.
Or
So,
you have to leave the con early,
well, yeah, that's a whole other thing.
right? You have to leave. If the con is over at 7, leave at 5,
Yeah.
right?
Well, yeah. Well,
That's why if you do it in San Diego, you would have to leave early, or you go back to your hotel and you wait 2 or 3 hours, then because you get that mad rush.
Yeah.
Actually, the last couple Baltimore cons, we just ordered room service.
Yeah, I think the longer you're in the game, the more you figure out how to make that stuff work.
Yeah.
And I've said it here before, the best move for comic book convention meetups with other people is breakfast. Like, don't even waste your time trying to get dinner reservations for 400 people in the Inner Harbor. It's not going to happen.
You're right. Yeah, there's like, oh, I got my party of 10 people, and we got our party of 10 people. And it's like, no, you're not going to find a place. It's not. There's no Chinatown where you can go in and like have a room for dim sum or something like that. You know?
Yeah, you just have to roll smarter, or you say, "Yo, I'll meet you at the breakfast joint at 8:30 before the show."
Everybody comes in all shaky from the night before.
Night of the Living Dead. Bill's giving away all the secrets out here. Baltimore, you need to try Miss Shirley's. Miss Shirley's is a that's evergreen. Every year we go to Baltimore, we got to hit up Miss Shirley's for Sunday
No,
brunch.
Miss Shirley's is that a breakfast or a?
Yeah, it's like a breakfast brunch soul food spot. It's really good. They have really great like shrimp and grits and stuff like that. I'm a fan. So, Mike, if you want to spend some time, let's talk about our past couple of episodes. Last Wednesday, we had Bob McLeod on. I think we had a really good time. How did you think that went on your end?
It was terrible.
I'm just going to stop asking you.
It was a terrible show. I cried. I cried all night. I couldn't be comforted. I was beside myself.
Were you rocking yourself to sleep?
Yeah. The cats kept coming and staring at me like, "What's wrong with him? Should we eat his face now?"
Just eat his face now. And then before that, we had Terry Beatty on. So we've had a lot of rich history.
A cavalcade of stars.
Show of shows, star of stars.
Well, we've had guys who've had a long careers. And I think one of the things about if you've had a long career in comics, you've seen more than one up and down, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Bob probably was around back when there was the implosion, the DC, the famous 77, 78 DC implosion, where a lot of people lost, a lot of books were canceled, and we're sort of in another weird time where people don't really know what's going on with the publishing and the whole pandemic and all that. And technology has changed a lot. Mm-hmm. So Bob started out as did I. I mean, it was just paper and pencils. There's no internet or anything like that. So I always find it interesting to talk. Just like I always found it interesting to talk to guys like Al or Will Eisner or anybody like that was older. I always wanted to find out what it was like back in the day, and it's interesting to see what changed and what didn't. Mm-hmm. Like storytelling is still storytelling.
Yeah.
Although now I was just reading, what was it today on Twitter? People don't like thought balloons, which seems very bizarre to me. Mm-hmm. Because that's such a part of the iconography of comics. But I guess I don't really read many current, or I should say, I don't read any current Marvel or DC comics. So occasionally I will buy one, but I guess that's the thing now. Spider-Man used to always have that inner dialogue going, but I guess they don't do that anymore. So I don't know.
I can't speak directly to that. I'm sure some of the pencilers in the chat might have to weigh in on that. But I have heard that that's being frowned upon. It's kind of like inner monologue type of comic book storytelling is kind of gauche right now. And but also, there's the need to draw 400 eyelets on Captain America's military boots.
Right.
Right. So there's that. Because I guess thought balloons aren't real. Like Sam Jackson, Nick Fury is real.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I just seem to. I think that's also part of the reversal sort of that's happened with the writers kind of taking the first seat post image.
Mm-hmm.
The companies, I think that's their slant is more the writer in control.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway,
yeah. And also, like I said, we had Terry Beatty on before Bob last Saturday, which also was a really great interview. And I got to say, I'm still having a lot of fun with these. And one of the things, Mike, that we talk about a lot off camera is how every guest kind of brings people with them, like kind of in their vapor trail. There's always some of their fans that come along and are introduced to pencil via the guest appearance on the show. And every week it seems like we have some new faces hanging around. We got a lot of new subscribers from over the past couple of episodes, so that's really encouraging to see. Also, that there's something to learn. Beyond you following your favorite person, then it's just like, oh wow, look at all this other stuff that's here. Have you gotten any good feedback lately about the podcast?
Yes, I think especially the last couple of episodes, and then the last. We've had quite a variety of,
Mm-hmm.
of cartooning,
Mm-hmm.
which is something I really like. Is that you can have a mainstream guy, a guy who did comics, somebody who did web comics, somebody who only did comic strips. I mean, that's the thing about comics. It's a much broader medium than many people actually think about.
Yeah.
There's people that do gag strips, not as much as they used to, but now that's sort of become like a meme thing.
Mm-hmm.
You could probably make memes all day. Draw stuff that could be made into memes.
There are people that do that, yeah.
Because in the old days, you would do up your gags and then you would shop them to the various, Field and Stream, or here's a gag about fishing or whatever. Now you would just make a meme.
Yeah. I was thinking about that old thing, the gag man, that's a job that doesn't exist anymore.
And they had people that just wrote that and would sell the idea to the cartoonist,
mm-hmm.
right? Just like you used to have, you have gag writers in comedy that don't, they're not on stage, but they're writing stuff for the comedian. It was the same thing. But I guess now that they would all be memes.
Yeah, that is a thing. I mean, I want to think
of the New Yorker, maybe.
I want to think that there's still space for the old school way of doing this stuff, but it does seem to be edging out with other things. Bill O'Donnell says, "Hey, remember romance comics were not in vogue for a bit, and our good buddy Tom Zoller has made some awesome romance comics." Mike Main.
That's true.
Yeah.
Although actually, Tom is fitting right in with, as we're always talking about, webtoons, because that's mostly romance. That's mostly what the people reading that want to see is romance.
Mm-hmm.
They're not interested in action or fisticuffs.
That's right.
Right.
Well, and I don't know, do you think, just to kind of kick the ball around for a second, do you think there is enough space for there to be an action webtoons, some sort of variant like that, where it's kind of like, Adventure Island web comics, where they're all kind of modern Johnny Quest type thing?
Yeah, I don't know. My suspicion is that there is not. Because I think if there was, webtoons would have more cartoons like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that because there's plenty of that in other areas, it seems like the people that are reading stuff online or the webtoon type stuff are not interested in those types of stories, because by and large, it seems like it's a much larger proportion of female readers. So, I mean, I've talked to a couple people who were interested in doing, maybe doing a Kickstarter or whatever, but I think it's harder to sell that kind of stuff to the younger audience.
Yeah. So let's get the rest of my housekeeping out of the way, and then we'll get our show started. And thanks for everybody that's been hanging out with us so long, for already as long as they have. If you're new to this, I kind of mentioned this quickly at the beginning. We are on every Wednesday and Saturday night at 8 p.m. EST. If you stumbled across this because somebody shared this with you, it was like, hey, check this out. These guys are doing a boot camp. We're here every Wednesday and Saturday with exciting guests and also other interesting parts of the business that we like to share. And this is all free, Mike Manley, free 99. What kind of deal is that?
For you, absolutely free for $5.
2 for $5. Just walk me to my trunk. I got you. So also our fine podcast is brought to you by the fine people at Graphicsly who make Clip Studio Paint. Look at the John right above my head. You see the John right there. And also our good buddy John Morrow over at twomorrows.com. We're getting good at this. Who was the mastermind behind Tomorrow's Publishing. Our publisher of Draw Magazine and Bob McLeod's Rough Stuff. And the Kirby Collector, the Lego Brick Journal, so many hits, so many jewels, Mike Manley. Mike, here I'm going to put you on the spot. What are some of your favorite? What are some of your favorite Tomorrow's products?
That one that you said, the Collector Kington. No, I really like comic book artist. I really like. I think my favorite still is the Kirby Collector.
Yeah, that's a great one.
That's the one that probably I saw first. So, I still. But I mean, all the mags are very interesting, but especially for me, especially the Kirby Collector, just because you get to see so much of his copies of his pencil work, things like that you wouldn't normally see.
I want to grab one. Hold on.
Going to the vault of Kirby.
What? Look at that. Yeah, man. Look at that. Look at the size on that. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I love it too that it was big because then you could see the art even better.
I'm not good at this. Yeah, and lots of really great scan pencils. There's a lot of layouts and breakdowns and things like that. Come on. Right? Like, stop playing. Go pick this up right now. One of my favorites, Mike Manley, is our good buddy Eric, who was hanging out in the chat tonight. What's up, Eric? His Modern Masters series. That I was trying to go for a full run. I think I have almost all of them. I think I'm missing a couple. I think I let a couple people borrow some, and now I got to replace them because they're never coming back.
That's always the thing about lending things as an artist. You want to make sure that the person that you're lending it to, A, is not going to trash it, and B, will give it back when you want it. I posted something about that Bernie Wrightson book, A Look Back, I bought when I was a teenager. And more than one person mentioned that they had a copy or they borrowed a copy, and either they didn't want to give it back or the person who borrowed it didn't want to give it back because they liked it so much.
Yeah, man, I know how that is. But even back when we were young, but I don't know, Mike. I don't. You didn't go through a comic book collecting phase, and I mean, I know you read comics and you were really into comics as a kid, but you were never into the like collecting part. Like they weren't really
You mean
doing
like
bag.
buying the whole runs of?
Well, no, like bag and board, and like put them in a nice little line, and then when people tried to open them, you were like,
Yes and
"Oh,
no. Yes
no."
and no. I mean, like if I went and bought a new copy, or I went and bought a Neil Adams Batman, or some old Kirby comic, they usually came in a bag, so I
Mhm,
would keep the bag. If
mhm.
they came bag and a board, I would keep that.
What
Uh,
with the bag, kind of like a tight brown paper bag type of, or like a.
no, 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 no. I mean, I had the usually if I bought it, if it had a board in it, it was already in the thing. So.
Mhm. I guess you know what I almost dated myself by asking you this is I for some reason had this thought that the Mylar bag and board thing was kind of recent, like the maybe the early '80s people started doing that, and like people before that weren't doing that because that wasn't a thing. I would like to know how when that kind of popped up, when all of a sudden people were like, "Oh, I need to put all this stuff in plastic," because I don't know where that
I
happened.
would say late '70s, early '80s, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when I would go to the Eye of Agamotto, the comic shop I visited as a kid,
That's a great
they
name.
right, they would have it is they Norm would have back issues which were bag and boarded, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Then he would, or at least bagged, and then he would have copies that were not perfect that you could buy for cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't think the it seems like the bagging and boarding became bigger later on. I think it became more because a lot of people just bought comics and they read them and then you
Right,
throw them in there
right.
in your pile. I'm sure most of the comics I had as a kid didn't have any uh, covering on them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I thought, and I think there could be people who are in the hobby, the collecting hobby, who just know after a certain year point, things started getting preserved more. So anything before that year is probably more rare and harder to find in a really good condition, right? Because that was like maybe a spike in the collecting timeline.
Right.
So
Yeah,
anyway,
I never really cared about all like whether it had to be in great condition. I just wanted to have a copy I could read.
yeah, I remember my one of my cousins who beat me into liking comics. Not like he not physically beat me, but he
Why
was.
that Superman?
It's like I was, everybody knows I was a comic strip guy, but my cousin had a couple of Marvel subscriptions, and I remember that was like when they don't do that anymore, right? But you could go into the back of the comic and just like, I want to get Alpha Flight and Avengers and Spider Man, and every month they would send them to him, and like kind of like a heavy craft paper bag,
Hmm.
right? And so I think maybe
Was it still folded?
no, he would be pissed when the mailman would fold them though. But yeah, they would come flat, but sometimes they'd get creased and he'd have a fit. But he was the first person I knew that had bags and boards in a white long comic book box that he kept things in. That was all new to me.
He was like, "What is this crazy collection you have? All these, all these various parts to just reading your comics."
I know, right? But and truth be told, like I kind of got out of, and I don't know how many of us as creators on the other side still collect like a fan does. You kind of like one thing seems like it has to fall to the wayside once you're doing this professionally for a while. Like I'm always surprised to hear. I think it was somebody we talked to said they go to the shop. Was it Jerry Ordway? He says he goes to the shop every week, that was kind of surprising for me. Not that he couldn't, but I don't really hear about a lot of pros that hit the shop with a tenacity like that.
Yeah, I would say that the majority of people I know don't seem to go,
Yeah.
like every week. I haven't
Yeah.
been every week since the double aughts.
Mm-hmm.
And every month, every year became a little bit less than the one before.
I mean, beyond everything just being expensive, sometimes it's just hard to get there. So, all right, let's get this started, Mike. You know what that means. I got a graphic for you. We're about to start boot camp.
It's so small. Oh, now it's giant. It's so small. Now it's giant.
Yeah. So, Mike, what are we talking about tonight, my friend?
I thought we would start by talking about drapery, which is something that every comic artist, every cartoonist, no matter whether you're drawing something realistically or you're drawing something, more cartoony or animated style or whatever, everybody has to learn how to draw people wearing suits and dresses, and it really is a measure of how well rounded you are as a draftsperson.
Mm-hmm.
If you can display how well you draw drapery, not just the naked figure, basically, because that's what all superheroes are naked, except for the lines describing the. But having to draw, not just Superman but Clark Kent, not just Batman but Bruce Wayne,
Right.
and Commissioner Gordon, and irrespective of style, you're always having to draw a lot of civilian stuff in any comic book. And so I thought, as one of the things I would teach would be when I would teach figure drawing for illustration or animation, I basically taught them the same way, which was to start out learning how to construct your figure, and then you dress your figure, almost like you're dressing a doll, right? And it takes a while to learn how to do drapery, but it really marks a level of draftsmanship that separates people that are just like A level and C level. There's certain people like Garcia Lopez is fantastic. Neil Adams is very good. He was fantastic too. And so the way I would teach it and the way I recommend people practice, and we'll show some examples, would be to when I taught the class, I would have the model come in and pose nude, and then I would have the model go get dressed, and the model come back and sit there with the clothes on.
Mm-hmm.
And what I would teach is the principles. We would teach them, the students, the 6 types of folds. And we'll talk about that here in just a second. And then basically what they would do is they would draw over the model, their drawing of the model. Now the model's in the same pose,
Mm-hmm.
so then you would drape the figure, right? You put the clothes on the figure. And then you would start understanding what was causing a fold, what kind of fold there is. That really gave people the ability to really go up as drafts people, because one of the things I will notice very often is I will see a young artist and they will draw somebody in a suit and it looks like they've never seen a person wearing a suit, or like have never drawn a pair of shoes.
Right.
And with the 2 strips I'm doing right now, especially with Judge Parker, it's all civilian. It's all civilian stuff. And it just makes you a better artist. So I thought we would start out with here. Let me get my thing here, and then I'll tell you where we can. So
and for everybody watching live, feel free to keep the chatter going. And if you have questions that kind of fit what we're talking about, I'll try to put them on. But try to keep them on topic. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, so we're going to start at the very beginning here. Let me see.
Which are you using, your other one, or are you sharing your regular screen?
Sharing my regular screen. So when you start talking about drapery, there's basically 6 types of folds, and every fold you see is one of these types of folds I'm going to show, or a combination of these types of folds. Again, if you go to the 839 animation union that we had shared as a resource a couple of weeks back, they actually have the chart from the famous artist school talking about the 7 types of folds. Also, on the web, there was a book put out by Jack Ham. He did one on animals, one on cartooning, and one on drawing people. There's a lot of really good, useful information in that book on drapery.
Mm-hmm.
So these I'm showing you here are from Brett's tutorial in an older issue of Draw magazine. So you basically start out with 6 types of folds. And once you learn the different types of folds, when you look at the figure, you look at the draped figure, you go, oh, okay, that's a pipe fold. That's an inert fold. That's a drop fold.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I will say is that all folds are triangular in shape. And in fact, if you look at these drawings here by Brett explaining the different types of folds, if you actually look at the shape of the fold, they're actually triangular. They may be long or wonky or flat on one side or whatever, but the fold is essentially still triangular. So you have the pipe fold, which is like a cylinder shape. Drop fold, which is usually something that's being suspended and hanging from a point. A diaper fold. And then you have a spiral fold, zigzag fold, and what we call a half lock fold. And so one of the things I would also have the students do is to do drawings of the different types of folds to learn them. And it's funny because some of the things that you learn, you eventually forget because it just becomes part of your process. So you don't think, oh, I'm drawing a spiral fold. You'll just know that it's a spiral fold, or you'll know that something is a diaper fold.
Mm-hmm.
So
and hold on, and the diaper fold, I will say that it's something that's being suspended by 2 different anchor points,
right,
and falling into the middle.
And basically, what you get is you get a diaper fold, and you get this zigzag.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
On a lot of these the fold pattern you're seeing are interlocking.
Mm-hmm. JRD had a question, Mike, as we talk about folds. He said,
okay.
So folds sort of follow perspective lines almost?
Yes, they can. Right. But a pipe fold is not going to necessarily follow.
Right.
Right. Now, as you go up and down a cylinder, the angle of the ellipse changes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're looking through space. So I think if you just practice. Now, what they would do in the old days is people would actually practice drawing these different types of folds.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They'd practice sitting there. I've seen them in the academy. They would pin up a nice piece of board, then they would pin up a piece of fabric to give them that diaper fold.
Mm.
The other thing is that when you are drawing, the folds are always created by either something hanging or stress, something pulling, pushing, pinching, creates the shape. Points of tension
Mm-hmm.
create folds. So that's the 6 types of folds. And again, you can. This is like a very common thing you could find a lot of reference for on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to show how important drapery was in expressing volume and character with a bunch of different artists who have slightly different approaches. So I wanted to start right away with great illustrator from back in the day, Beckhoff.
Mm.
And if you just go to Google, I mean, again, the time we live in is great for this, because any artist I mentioned tonight, you can just type their name in Google and there will be just a zillion copies of their work. But one of the things I liked about Beckhoff's stuff was the masterful drapery.
Mm.
But it's this very light decorative line. Now his compositions are worthy of someone like Rockwell.
Mm-hmm.
Everything reads so well against each other. But if you look at the drapery, it's the curves are describing the form, because he's not a renderer.
Right.
Yet these feel very dimensional, and they don't feel flat, right? They're flat and they're graphic, but they don't feel flat.
Right.
Right. So he has a lot of space and volume in his drawing. So another great Beckhoff, a lot of great character. And then, the different types of fabric. That's the other thing about drawing folds. A heavier fabric will have less folds.
Right.
Like a big, thick wool coat will have less folds than a thin silk shirt.
Right.
That will have more folds. But one of the things is, once you start learning drapery and you learn the stress points, you'll be able to invent the drapery on your character. Here's another great Beckhoff.
Yeah, that's
just
cool.
Right. Super simple, but not flat. Graphic, but not dead. Right.
Yeah.
This fold on the pants is what we call a half lock. This refers back to the one I was showing before. And you usually find half locks at the knees and the elbows, and sometimes the shoulders too.
Can we talk about the soldier for a minute? Go back. What I love about this is that there's so much information in the drapery on this character, but the kind of like the outline of the figure isn't kind of playing to it, right? It's almost like inside information,
right. I mean, the contour line is nowhere near. It's not heavier.
Yeah.
Like one of the conventions you see in the comic books is that the contour lines on the figures are very bold, and then the lines inside may be less bold.
Yeah.
But he works completely against that convention, yet everything still feels very dimensional.
Yeah. Wow.
Just all this great, smart drapery that is also describing action, but describing form. Very, pulling, twisting, just, great gestures. You really feel the squeezing of the shoulders, the twisting of the figures. Here's another great one. Just beautiful design. And especially for people working in animation where we can't render. right? You can't render stuff. Now, I guess if you're working on 3D, you know, they write software for, you know, wet fabric and stuff like that.
Mike, we have a question from the room. My good buddy Rob asks, Mike, do you recommend practicing drapery from images like fashion shots?
Yes, but it's also important to pick good images. One of the things about all the illustrators I'm showing you tonight as examples is not only are they masters of composition and have, you know, empirical drawing skills, but they also know how to stage things so that the folds and the drapery read very well, right? And one of the things about fashion illustration, which was huge in the day, it's all been killed by photography. I actually remember when I was a kid, in the newspaper, there would be ads that were drawn by hand for like Lord and Taylor and all the big department stores that were really just beautiful drawings. And for a long time, I think the thought is that women preferred to see a drawing of the dress than an actual real model in the dress, because somehow they could imagine themselves wearing the clothes more by looking at the illustration than if you actually specifically show a skinny 18-year-old girl wearing a dress. Then it's very specific, right? So yeah, artists like Rockwell spent a lot of time. In fact, there's a great book everyone should have called Rockwell Behind the Camera, which shows his process of designing his pictures and then doing extensive photography to get the figures and get the reference that he needed. I am sure that Beckhoff probably had people posing too. Another great guy is Albert Dorn.
Oh yeah, Dorn.
Right, and now Dorn is a big artist because he influenced so many other artists. I mean, he influenced John Buscema immensely. He influenced Frank Frazetta. He influenced Jack Davis. I mean, he was such a prolific artist, but he's also an artist. Alex Toth. So many people were influenced by him. And as you can see, I mean, just magnificent drapery. And he didn't always use models, supposedly. Some of this he actually made up. And that's the point you want to get to. Like, I can tell, like, this fold, these folds are drawn.
Yeah.
Not from a photograph. And I can tell that because of the type of folds that I'm looking at, right? When I look at a fold that comes from somebody who took a photograph, you might see some sort of interesting, like, to me, this looks like there's a little shortening and things like that.
Yeah.
He might have gotten from looking at, and like even in these folds in here.
It's posed.
It looks like something that he might have gotten from the model. Like some of these folds in here may have gotten from them, like in here.
Yeah, I was going to talk about that pocket right there. I love that.
Right. This looks like something you could make up, and you could make up the folds convincingly like he did here. And it doesn't necessarily look like, okay, so this is a half lock, right? You can see this is a half lock. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more. But anyway, Dorn was great. This is actually a Dorn that I own. I bought it Illustration House years ago. It's an old Kellogg's Pep ad.
Yeah.
Right. And this is made up. This drapery is something that he drew himself. Right. It's very convincing. He understands the principles of all the folds, like we were talking about earlier. So he's able to make this up. Right. It's very bold and cartoony and very fresh, has a lot of energy in it. And it's amazing if you go back. 60 years, how many illustrations there were in the magazines that were just like this for all kinds of products. Here's another. Here's a Dorn drawing that almost looks like something you would see in a comic book.
Yeah.
Right. Almost looks almost like Jack Davis or Kniff or somebody like that.
I was going to say that. Yeah. Looks like the modern combat stuff.
Right. And so he's making these folds up as opposed to drawing them from photo reference. Right. And it kind of fits also with this because it seems like there's a little bit of sort of a humorous thing going on. And here's probably one of the most famous drawings by him, which was for the famous artist, was run in the famous artist course. It was actually on a piece of tracing paper, which he used to draw on. But just look at the magnificent drapery. You really, the great thing about his drapery is it so well describes the form underneath it, the tension, what the body is doing. It's very stylized. It's almost like what I call dressing the form or dressing the fold, because like these if you look at a photograph, like you might have seen somebody doing that, there'll be extra folds, right? Then you sort of eliminate some of them and just keep some. You're choosing the folds that are actually describing the form or the action the best.
It's gorgeous.
Here's another Beckhoff. And I think this stuff looks very modern.
Yeah, it does.
You know, it looks very, very, very modern. Here's another Beckhoff.
So well designed too.
Right. So you're seeing all these. He's playing now. He understands it well enough that he's playing. Look how he's getting all these interesting rhythms. I can go back to that Dorn drawing. You can notice the folds in the pants here.
Yeah.
Right. You'll start to see, okay, there's a high point here, a stress point. It's pulling the pants down. The fold radiating up towards that. Right.
I love that line across the guy on the right who you were just talking about, how that line pulls so tight across the front of his leg.
Right.
Oh, right. It's gorgeous. Yeah.
Right. Here's another great Beckhoff. Let's see if I make that bigger.
Hold on, let me get rid of the object.
Just beautiful. You really feel, even though this is a very thin line with no extra dimension, no push, pull, thick, thin, you really feel the volumes. This is almost like the clear line Claire style of the French cartooning. I think that they were also influenced by artists like him. Just beautiful, beautiful drawing.
Yeah.
So, and then in comics, you sort of started out with people like Alex Raymond, right? Who was noted for first doing Flash Gordon and then doing Rip Kirby, his detective character after he came back. And one of the reasons I like going back really and looking at that generation of guys is because they really knew how to. They would call that school the wrinkle artists, was one of the terms, because there was so much drapery. And this is from Raymond's earlier period of Flash Gordon. But you can see how the drapery describes Dale's form, right? And how all the rendering, everything, and then again this drapery here. You can go back, and I'm going to do some drawings after this to sort of explain some of these folds in action. But let's see where I had another. This is Raymond a few years later.
Mm.
And the interesting thing about a guy like Alex Raymond, who was very, one of, the top 2 or 3 guys ever, and influenced everybody who came after him. He was also at the same time, I think, being influenced by people like Beckhoff, because Raymond had great mastery of his drapery, but he also played around with his line quite a bit. If you look at this, this is all brush. This is all pen.
Yeah.
This is another early Raymond. So we compare this to that.
Yeah.
Same pose, basically, right?
Yeah.
A few years later, right? Now, he probably had a model come in and pose, as many of the strip guys did. They would have models come in and they would shoot models for stuff. But here's another early Raymond, right around the same time. This is I think this is from Jungle Jim. You can see early in his career, he was learning the drapery. He did not have quite the mastery of drapery that he had later.
Oh, you're killing me with that. Look at that. That's great.
All right. So this sort of zigzag pattern, and again, as I mentioned earlier, the folds are triangular, right? And he's very loose. Again, he's very loose. The one thing about Raymond is that his inks are very loose.
Yeah.
They're just in the right spot, so they're not. It's not stiff. But this, you have a hanging fold, and then you have basically these are spiral folds, like the folds we were looking at earlier, right? That's what you're seeing, spiral folds. So you sort of have a combination between a drop fold or a fold created by something hanging. So folds are often in a jacket or a coat. Are a combination, right? The part hanging down and then being crushed, right? Or tension. And the fold is also always describing the dimension of the volume, right?
And it goes without saying that all of this is because of gravity.
Right.
Right. Tension and gravity.
This is another early Raymond from Rip Kirby. So here's Rip Kirby later. But each story, what was very interesting to me about studying his work is that each story he kind of changed up his game a little bit, right? Look at this. This is later. This might have been a couple years before that. This is like, what, 47? He died in 57 or 56, I think. But this is all brush. Big, choppy.
Chunky, yeah.
Right, yeah. And look how these big, choppy, almost kind of more like Kniff in a way.
Yeah.
So he really played around a lot. But you really feel the film noir and almost a very this is like something he was trying to create in the newspaper strip, something that would compete with the film noir stuff you would see in the movies. And this is almost like a direct riff of a famous Edward Hopper drawing or etching of a guy in the street. But yeah, again, here another example of him completely different. All pen line, very loose,
Mm-hmm.
right? As opposed to the one we were just looking at. So I'm sure he probably had somebody pose for this.
Yeah.
Right? And he might have had somebody pose for some of these things, but some of these he might have made up.
Yeah. His robe looks like it has actual weight to it.
Right. And again, one of the things that will affect drapery is the type of material. So if this is a silk bathrobe, this is different if you're wearing a heavy suit,
Right.
right? So you're going to get different types of, the heavier the material, the thicker the folds you would get, right?
Yeah. Oh, Mike, some JRD said when it got asked about things to practice on, when Rob asked about fashion shots, JRD then asked, it almost sounds like movie stills would be a better source for practicing, for reference.
Movie stills, again, you have to be, the old movie stills are good, especially black and white movie stills,
Yeah.
because the lighting is set up to describe the form so well.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that there used to be, remember Williamson told me back in the day, there used to be many stores in New York City that you could go and buy old movie stills. And a lot of the illustrators and cartoonists would go and buy these old movie stills because they had great lighting.
Mm-hmm.
And so here's another guy I learned a lot about drapery from, even though he's not realistic at all, which was Steve Ditko.
Yeah.
And you see, again, here's some diaper folds.
Yeah.
Right? And a lot of zigzag folds.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And in fact, Ditko was one of the first artists that I was, because he understood the practice of drawing the 6 or 7 folds, the half lock, the diaper fold, and his work always had that in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that because of that, I could look at his work and it was formulaic in there. Here's one of his great. These are such dynamic folds.
Yeah, those knees are great.
Right.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot from him in the beginning on like, oh, okay, I can see how he's doing those folds like that, you know. One of the things when you go into animation, you have to start simplifying things. Oh, here's another great Dorn. Now, I believe he actually drew this maybe from imagination,
mm-hmm.
by understanding what I understand about drapery. And you can compare like how he put the folds on the pants and stuff. And he may have looked at a photograph, but I think he was one of those guys who was noted for being able to do an illustration like really, really, really fast.
Mm-hmm.
So, but like if you look at these, waistcoats or long coats, you get this little curve
mm-hmm.
where it hangs down, and you can see he's finding that on each one of those.
That's my disgusted brilliance.
Another guy I think is great is Leonard Starr.
Yeah.
I mean, the strip guys really, probably actually more than anybody else, really knew their drapery, because they did, hundreds. They did 300 something strips every year,
mm-hmm.
right? And so the amount of drapery that they drew, and he's certainly, Starr was one of the best. And this is all brush,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, can we hang out on this one for a minute? That's gorgeous. Never mind the blacks, but just like the mastery of the the drapery, like underneath the arm, right
Right.
there. Yeah.
Now he probably posed for this. Had somebody pose, they would do that. And so because you were trying to get like this, as I can tell, this is the kind of thing here where you see this extra bit of material and how that fits and how the foreshortening is here. That's something that he used a photo, but you still have to understand the principles of drapery to make it stylish, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here's an early comic book cover by him. So again, I'm sure he posed for this. I can tell that by looking at this, right? But then you still have to go in and design it and make it look cool. So it's not enough just to have the photo. You have to know what to do with the photo. So understanding those principles of the different types of folds is essential. And another guy who is also great, of course, is Garcia Lopez. You know, just everything he drew was elegant. You know, here's one of my favorite covers by him. Just elegant. Everything is beautiful and elegant. From the position of the hands, of the drapery, how much drapery do you put on the dress? You can still see her form underneath the dress. Are we still on?
Here I am. I don't know. Sorry, folks. I don't know what happened. We glitched out.
Okay. You glitched.
Right.
You glitched.
Yeah,
glitched.
go ahead. I'm back. Go ahead.
Okay.
What's that Lois Lane?
This is Garcia. I was saying this is Garcia Lopez.
Oh, okay.
And there was another great Garcia Lopez drawing of Lois. So the thing is that even when you start going into animation, right? So here's Bruce's design for Clark.
Mm-hmm.
It's simple, like Beckhoff, but it's actually simpler. So you have to really start to decide how you want to. There's Lois, and then here's the other Lois from the. So here's the Superman from the Fleischer cartoons,
Mm-hmm.
right? And see how simple they eliminate almost all the drapery, but you can still. What's left has to describe the form, right?
Yeah.
And you can see when Bruce was doing, those guys are doing the, and this is even pushed even more geometric because they figured out it was easier for the overseas studios to match the style. When you start, every little extra thing you put on here, like there's the extra 4 buttons,
Mm-hmm.
He's got 1 button. I mean, this is a double-breasted suit, but still, you had to learn how to eliminate. Here's a great Garcia Lopez drawing.
Wow.
Right, and you can see it's the silhouette. He's figuring out the silhouette, and then he's designing the folds.
Mike, can we talk to the action of, and I call it this, and I don't know if this is a real term, of drawing down. Like it seems like Garcia Lopez is looks like he was almost like pulling down his lines through his figure work. Did I make that up, or it kind of feels like you can feel the heaviness?
Right, you do feel the weight, but if you really see what he's emphasizing here is the shape.
Yeah.
The shape first, and then the drapery, right? So he's emphasizing this shape,
right,
very fashion-like, right? Each angle, very fashion-like. Same. This is just that pushed a little bit more, right? The same principles, just taken to a more of an extreme. So I would say the best thing to do is to start drawing and then work from a photo. If you're going to work from the photo, the first thing you have to do is to draw the figure out almost as a mannequin, and then you dress the figure. If you don't do that, then what you don't get is you don't get form. You won't have form, and then your folds won't describe the form. And that's what you see in all these samples I'm showing, is the fold, the drapery is describing the form. Very often I will see a young artist, and what happens is the drawing will have almost like deformed space, because there's part of the drawing that will feel dimensional, and then all of a sudden, like another part of the drawing, like maybe the line around the wrist, will not describe the wrist. It'll be too flat, and so it's like this part of the arm feels volumetric, this part of the arm feels flat, and so there'll be parts of the drawing that don't really work, and it sort of kills the overall sense of volume. So I will get set up here to try to do my
your demo.
Demo.
And while you're getting set up, I will say hello to everybody who's watching this live. If you have any other questions for Mike or myself while we're going through this episode, feel free to post it. And just know that I don't post everything you guys say, so feel free to have chatter amongst yourselves. You never know who's going to be in the chat room. Was a couple of weeks, Mike. Walt Simonson keeps popping up, right? Like you never know who's watching. So make a friend.
True. Make a friend. Sit down.
Sit down. So, Mike,
stay a while.
Are you gonna share that other screen?
Yeah, if you can.
Oh,
it
disappeared. I didn't know. It must have dropped.
Disappeared?
Yeah, you're going to have to like read.
Oh, hold on a second.
Okay.
Trying to use my camera phone to get the...
Well, Mike, while you're doing that, I had a nice comment from our buddy Colleen, who was talking about Raymond's work while you were talking. I appreciate the style progression of Raymond's work and his flexibility in his style from early to later in his career.
Yeah, I really do think that he was one of the artists who really grew the most from being pretty average, nothing remarkable, to being like the king, really. I mean, if you look at his work in the beginning, you wouldn't, not think that he would end up being the giant of the industry. I mean, a giant in a way that many younger people now have a hard time understanding. But I mean, basically, anybody who drew realistic comics after he came along and after he did Flash and Rip Kirby, everybody was riffing on him. People would steal, swipe. He was basically a school, as Jack Kirby would say. He was a school for generations of people. And there was a whole, the DC house style in the 50s where you had a lot of guys like Starr and John Prentice and the Berry brothers, all really what they call sort of the New York slick or the wrinkle artists, all came out of really what he was doing on those strips, more so than Foster, because Foster was drawing knights and he wasn't drawing guys wearing suits, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It was sort of like Raymond and Kniff were the two guys, and we're still today descendants of how those guys sort of figured out how to do this stuff, you know. So again, the principles I'm going to show now don't really matter what style. It's just learning how to do the drapery, and then you can apply it to anything, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So
some people may ask, why is this important, Mike Manley? Why does it matter how I draw the fold on the knee of somebody wearing some chinos? What does this add to the art? Does that make art cool to add folds and stuff?
yeah.
Okay. That was my layman question for the evening.
Yeah, I think drapery is important because it makes your drawing better.
Fair enough.
You know, I mean, I think even if you are trying to do something cartoony, you know, the knowledge that you have of drapery helps you simplify and stylize your folds. Because one of the things when I would work on the storyboarding, I'd work on Batman or Superman or the Venture Brothers, or Samurai Jack. You know, Samurai Jack, drapery was super stylized.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever drapery there was super stylized. And so it was more about design. But that design is still based upon the principle of understanding what a fold does. You know, what happens to the folds on an arm when an arm bends, right? You might only be able to draw one, right? Or you might be able to, like, why don't you return the camera? Am I on now?
I don't see you yet.
You don't see me again? Okay. I just did it. Oh, wait a minute.
All right, here it is. It says you, okay. All right, I'm turning you on, Mike. All right.
Okay. So, once you biggerize that. So, even if you have let's say, a cartoon arm, and then we can draw, say, more realistic arm. And then you get your elbow in there, you get your forearm in. Now I'm going to do more of a cartoon arm where you've got to keep things simple. But of course, simple is design, right? Simple is not just, easy. That's the thing that people think, but it's actually the opposite. So, what would typically happen in a cartoon, say this guy had a shirt that was open, cuff was open, right? Again, you want to be very careful of the volume. You might have one fold here,
right?
Sort of one half lot, and you might have, maybe not. Sometimes you would have a fold here, but very often you would not even have a fold on the shoulder, right? You would just have the fold here where the arm would bend, right? Mm-hmm. Now, if you're drawing something a little bit more realistic, again, depending upon the type of shirt that you had, you would have your what we call a half lock. So I did this little drawing earlier here. I should show. So these are what I call half locks. So there's typically a half lock on the elbow. This is where the fold compresses. Gravity compresses this fold, and this part comes up, gets compressed under that. So you really sort of get this little shape like this, right? And then the next one you usually get is on the knee. This comes from the knee. It goes under the knee, right? And then on the pants, you would go, this is over, and this is under. So there, right? The interlock like that. Now, you could have another fold from the knee, because they would come down from the high point of the knee back to the back of the leg, and your pants kind of go up. If you sit down and you wear a pair of pants, you will actually see this yourself. So each fold would radiate from the low point to the point of tension, which is the knee. The knee is pulling everything here, right? It's almost like an arrow. Knee's pulling here, and then the knee is pulling here. And the pants are hanging down. That Hank Ketchum stuff you were showing a week or so ago, he's a prime example of this, right? So you might have one line sometimes hanging down from the shoulder, and you might have a little bit of a half lock there, and then maybe one point of tension of the arm being pulled, the fabric being pulled under, or not. You may just simply have an arm with one fold.
And that can get you going if you have.
You look at a lot of cartooning, simple cartooning, you would just see, that's all you would see. Right? You see a lot of that where you would see a leg and you'd have one fold on the leg.
Yeah.
Right?
Very basic.
Right. That's like the simplest fold you could make would be something like that. Right? But always remember, the tension is created from here, hanging, and then this is bending, so this is pulling from here to here. So what I would do is I would have the student, let's say I'm going to draw a person sitting in a chair now. And usually what I would do is I would have the model come in. Draw the chair first. If you draw the chair first, then you can put the pelvis on the chair. Then it's easy. You put the pelvis on the chair to get the leg. Again, it's important to feel the volumes, to understand the foreshortening on this leg is going to be different than the foreshortening on this leg. In fact, one of the things when you're working from photos, and the internet is just full of, you could type man sitting on chair, whatever, you'll get like a bajillion photos.
is just practice warming up, doing loose sketches like this.
Mm-hmm.
So I got the guy's arm sitting back over the chair. Maybe you have his arm coming down, sitting down, or maybe I want it on his knee. One of the things I found very helpful, this is my $1 million tip today. When you're drawing a figure, if you draw this little diamond shape, that does two things. It really helps. I found this out myself. This is my little shortcut I sort of invented. If I do this, it gives me the collarbone and it gives me the trapezius. So it already gives me volume in my torso.
Mm. And that also keeps people from just having a head floating on the chest.
Right. Well,
Right.
you got to get the neck in there,
Yeah.
right? And then if you get the neck in, you've got the mastoid. So if you draw the pillar of the neck, roughen the mastoid. So these kinds of drawings that I'm doing are drawings to understand form, right? So I know that you got the chest, the rib cage or the thoracic arch, belly button, run right over to the arch of the pelvis. So what I'm trying to do is just create this structure. And if I create this successful at creating a good structure, then it's easier to drape the structure.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to do a lot of drawings like this when I was younger, where I would find a photo that I liked, and then I would draw the character or the person in that pose. There's always a little step. One thing about drawing the wrist, you get to cross the bone, across the top of your wrist. Right.
Mm-hmm.
That helps you then draw the wrist, the palm of the hand, put the thumb on. So
Master class, Michael Manley.
So now let's say, get the hairline. Then this is just to show you how you can drape the figure. So let's say he's just wearing.
Pirate shirt.
Okay, he could be wearing a pirate shirt.
See, this is the power I have on the podcast.
I want to feel that volume going around. So first thing I'm going to do with that is get around his neck. Then I know that there's going to be some tension because of the neck and the arm being moved back. Right. So, and there might be the top of the chair. And then the high point of the arm, there would be folds going around, probably some bunching up. This is the high point, so the folds would be going from here down. So I would think this is almost like a half diaper fold. Like a diaper fold is like that, right? Whoop, 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 whoop.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just going to get some of that. Just feel the volume of this, even if his pants are ripped. These are spiral folds going around. And everything I want to do, every fold that I'm doing, is describing the volume. We're describing the volume of the form beneath it. So, for instance, if I inaccurately do this, right, and I inaccurately do this, what happens is I kill the volume.
Yeah.
That my drawing goes flat. So even if I had to draw this leg with one line like Beckhoff, right? I want that line to be describing the form and the turning of the form in space. That's the most important thing about drapery, is that the drapery is complying to the form. Half lock, half lock.
Clap on, clap off. Mike, JRD asked real quick, describing the volume of the shirt or the body filling the shirt?
You're describing the body underneath, right? This form is describing it complies to the body.
Yeah.
Right? It complies to the body. So these folds are very important in that they should comply or describe, they are affected, they are pulled by gravity or by tension, these tension points from here down, because this body is pulling, this shirt is being pulled this way. So even though I'm making them up based upon understanding the principles that I'm talking about. I want this to describe
Rob found his issue a draw, number 10, with Brett's draping article in the Bootcamp section, page 80. That was a great article. Great magazine. Thanks, Rob. Man, so much work to draw Wolverine. Nice. I think the young cartoonists may not be prepared for, Mike, the amount of technical know-how needed to create comics.
What do you mean? The technical know-how to?
Well, I mean, again, if you just say something like, "Ooh, draw me Thor," right? But then having to kind of break all of that down into shapes and to volume and drapery and how his cape, you know, ask a kid to draw Thor's cape. You know what I mean? And it's not as easy as it sounds.
Well, nothing is easy when you start, right? So what I'm trying to do is give people principles that they can practice themselves,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Oh, nice with the aqua brush. One of my favorite hacks right there. You're getting a lot of really nice praise, Mike. Colleen says, thanks, Mike, for the visual showing the difference between accurate and inaccurate angles on drapery. It really was clear to see the difference. Thank you, Clean. Thanks for watching.
Again, this is just something to give people the idea,
Yeah.
the principles, and I used to do a lot of drawings like this where I just showed you, I would dress the figure and then go and put the drapery on.
Mm-hmm.
You would be surprised how fast you can learn drapery.
Yeah.
I would say if you were serious at it for like a month, you would be surprised how fast, because there's only really 6 types of folds. And once you understand how a fold is made or what causes a fold, then you can go, oh, okay, that's a pipe fold, that's a zigzag fold, that's
right. Right. Mike JRD asks, this is an interesting question, kind of going along the lines of the form and the drapery fitting the form. He asks, so we should also take into account the body and the shirt. The folds would then drape differently on Clark Kent as they would with Jimmy Olsen. Does that make sense?
No, the principles of drapery are the same. The only difference would be that they might be tighter on Clark than on Jimmy, because Clark is bigger, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like if you had a skinny person, Clark's a big barrel-chested guy, right? So any shirt going around him is just going to be a little tighter, right? If Jimmy is a skinny guy or average person, his shirt might hang a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Like he's not filling it out the same way Clark.
Yeah. Clark's arm would fill out his shirt.
Mm-hmm. But also, this was kind of like a comic book trope, like to a degree. If you see some artists who say would draw a a comic book, everybody in the book has tight clothes on, right? Which can kind of be like a giveaway that they're not paying attention to the different body shapes of the character,
Well, also a lot of people just don't understand drapery.
right? Like I
Right.
remember going through a lot of old '80s Marvel comics, and everybody at the Daily Bugle had these tight these tight slacks on. But
Right.
like when a thinner character maybe have more of a bigger shirt on. So yes, I'm agreeing with what
Yeah.
Mike says, but
Jimmy.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, there was that time in the '90s where everybody had Image Comics pants. It had nothing to do with how uh, clothes really fit anyone.
Right.
So, like Jimmy's stuff might be looser or baggier. Right? He might have more. He might have more sleeve. Right? I would think that Jimmy would have more sleeve than Clark.
Hmm.
He'd have much looser fabric on his. Might have more slope shoulder. So he had more.
Hmm.
Yeah. Where Clark, if you look at a bodybuilder, those guys that are really massive, right? They basically their arm is like this, right? And the side of their body is so big that basically you got the cut of the sleeve. You have very little hanging.
Hmm.
You might have a little bit more here, just on the side, but their arm is going to fill the whole thing up.
Right.
Where Jimmy's is going to hang, right?
Hmm.
Um, so if you can even just start out with, again, pay attention to the volume of an arm. If I have an arm coming at me foreshortened,
Hey, everybody in the chat room, let me know if you're enjoying what we're doing tonight. Give me a hoot hoot. Very much. Thank you. Woody woo. Nice. Keep it coming. Thank you to all of our. I see some new faces on YouTube. I hope that you're subscribing. Smash that bell. We go live every Wednesday and Saturday, 8 p.m. EST.
So I just kind of roughed it. Now, if I want to put a dress shirt on this guy, I'm thinking like, where's the tension coming from?
Mm-hmm.
Here, and radiating down, right? So the shirt can go around his waist. And his waist is not flat. His waist would probably go down and around. Just like his. And then these would be spiral folds. It would be going around.
Right. It's even like consider when you put on a shirt and you have to kind of like adjust the shirt after you put it on. This is you put it over your head doesn't mean it's laying
Right.
on you, right? And you get those spirals just from putting on the shirt.
Right. What I'm always thinking of is like how the form underneath. The another thing I always suggest is to erase. People don't like to erase, but actually erasing is drawing, because now I've got my form. My erasing can help make this a little bit clearer to me. I can see the form. I can see. This is actually one of the things that happened from drawing stuff like Judge Parker, where I had to draw like very straightforward, realistic people.
Mm-hmm.
I actually got even better at this because of that.
Mm-hmm.
What I want to feel is that this is being pulled up over the arm. And this is being pulled. So one side of the body is stressed and one side of the body is relaxed.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to keep the outline, the silhouette good. Now I could, shoot a photo, whatever, to make this super realistic. Or I can make it up understanding the principles of drapery.
Sorry about that, guys. We're back. Everything's going crazy. Mike, can you hear me? There you go. All right, hold on. All right, Mike, you're good.
We good? Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm just showing, you're emphasizing you want to keep this, the silhouette of is important.
Mike, could you talk about, I'm sorry, I may have missed it, kind of like the high tension point that's happening right under the armpit?
Right here. Yeah, that's what
yeah.
everything is being pulled towards.
Yeah.
And there would be a little bunching up here. So I'm sort of doing this to try to overemphasize what's happening here. Right.
Hey, Mike, I got a great question from the room. Professor Spector, I'm enjoying Professor Spector, says, when studying from photos, I find it hard to make it entirely appealing because you sort of have to know which drapery lines to omit so it doesn't look too cluttered. How do you navigate that?
Well, you look towards your what would be the most important lines, which would be, I'm thinking, are these lines here, right? Because there might be, as I said before, there may be a lot of secondary lines, right? So, for instance, you've got the line of the head of the sleeve, probably have a line fold here. And depending upon, like silk has a lot of folds in it. Silk, like a silk shirt would probably be like that. You'd have a lot of small crush folds because it's a very fine material. And the finer the material, the more folds you're going to have.
Right.
So if I was saying that this was a silk, because this was silk, you would have Probably this. You probably have this. You'd have a lot more.
Right. And maybe stress points from the buttons on the shirt and things like that.
Right. I was sort of just trying to simplify this to
Yeah. Yeah.
give you an idea of where the tension would be coming from this point.
Mm-hmm.
And this pulling up is giving you this tension point.
Mm-hmm.
So everything is going to this tension point. Everything would be going to that tension point. There's a button.
Mm-hmm. Professor Spector says, yes, that makes sense.
So that's your basic idea for drapery.
Mm-hmm.
Construct your figure. You can draw the mannequin, but make sure when you're drawing the mannequin, again, make sure that if you have a torso, you're really paying attention to the volume. Use your center line. Draw in what I always say is a sculptural way. It can even be loose, but you really need to be. What is this volume? What is this volume? Where's the waist? Right? If you don't get these volumes in, you don't feel the volume is actually more important than the anatomy.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Than all the muscles. Right? This volume is more important than the muscles.
Mm-hmm.
Because you may not draw all the muscles. But the volume on the bottom of that foot is important, so that foot has volume. The volume at the bottom of here and here is different than here and here.
Mm-hmm.
Take your time. Think about the volume.
Hey, Mike, can I throw a couple things at you before we wrap up? So what about, let's take the idea of your character that you just inked, or maybe this guy you're working on. What about putting a heavy object on top of a shirt? Say, I'm imagining a detective's gun holster, like a shoulder holster, is like going across his shirt. And like, how does the shirt get crushed by that underneath, if that makes sense? So you're probably creating some new folds or some tension underneath that strap going over his shoulder and across his chest, right? And while you're blocking that out, Colleen asked earlier in the stream, I'll put it up here now. Do you have a preference drawing men's clothing versus women's clothing? What are your favorite and least favorite types of clothing styles to draw? Thank you, Colleen.
I don't really have a preference.
Yeah. I was going to say, in my mind, it's kind of like whatever the story needs, right? But
right.
do you see that you would go, wow, I really love drawing all of the women's clothing in the Judge Parker strip versus drawing the phantom in like jungle aborigines or something like that.
I actually prefer drawing the jungles to drawing. The jungles are a lot more creative because you can have a lot of fun with the jungle. So first, I was thinking if what do they call this? Something brown or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So I'd be thinking like, how does that go around? Sometimes they have two. You know, it also depends upon whether it's a new shirt, whether it's an old shirt.
I'm going to throw stuff at you while you're drawing, Mike. Ben Harvey, our boy Ben Harvey asks, has Mike ever read Bern Hogarth's book on drapery? His take is very similar.
No, I burned all my Bern Hogarth books.
See, I just said in the chat, not a lot of guys take a lot of warmth to Hogarth. Can you kind of explain what that's about?
I just think that you know, while he was a very noted person, his work was just full of a lot of crap, a lot of inaccuracies. But what happens is, because they're so deftly and expertly drawn, they convince you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember having kind of a similar conversation, probably with Ben, like years ago, about the illusion of print, meaning like you may really enjoy something in a comic, but then it may not be actually correct, but because it's printed in front of your face, you kind of register it as correct. So it takes a really keen eye to point out the inaccuracies or mistakes in a printed comic book.
Well, I think that, and I could be wrong, but I think the reason why the Hogarth books got such good gain was that the Loomis books went out of print.
Oh, he stepped into the lane, right?
Right. The Loomis books started going out of print in the 60s, but the Hogarth books were always in print. So if you went into a store and you wanted to get a book on drawing, you would find the Hogarth books by accident.
Right.
You know, because they would be the only ones in there. You would never find the Loomis book. So if I have this guy here, I'm thinking this comes around. There might be a little bunching here.
Yeah.
You know, might be a little bunching here. This comes down. Again, it depends upon the kind of shirt. Is it more of a fitted shirt or not? I know that the folds coming around. So the folds coming around this arm are going to do this, right? Because they have to describe that volume. And I know that the folds here are going down and around. And then there would be some crunching, bunching up, right? There would be some bunching up here, right? Because he's twisting, right? These folds are going to do this. And these folds are going to do this. And this fold's going to do this, right? And this is going around. So you have to think about what is causing the tension. Is the body turning, right? If his body is going this way, that means the tension is going to be pulled that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
If his body is turning, this is going like this. This is going like this. You're going to get this. This kind of tension. It's the principles. That's why when you look at somebody like Ditko, who didn't draw anywhere near as beautifully as somebody like Raymond, his figures still had great drapery because he would understand that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I can draw a fold. That's describing that action.
Mm-hmm.
This is coming over. This is going to pinch.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This is coming over. It's going to pinch. And you would probably have a pinch and a release, like so. There's another great guy, actually, talks about all these same principles. Will Weston is on Instagram. He teaches art at Art Center, and he has a costume drawing class. And he has a lot of this same type of information on there. So I know that these folds are going to
Mike, your audio dropped out. Hey, Mike.
Hey, we're having technical difficulties, I guess, tonight.
Yeah, you want to try to finish your lesson and then we'll wrap it up.
Well, I'm pretty much done. I was just saying that the thing to learn is what is causing the fold.
Mm-hmm.
By paying attention to what's happening underneath the body, underneath the tension. Folds are caused by either tension pulling something, or by the lack of tension and something hanging, right? And if you study the seven folds, the main thing to do is then to identify that type of fold. Oh, that's a pipe. That's a pipe fold. That's a diaper fold. That's a drop fold that turns into a pipe fold. So analyze that. Try to write the name of the folds. So what I would do is have the student come in, and again, I'd have the model sit down, nude,
they would draw the model. The model would come back, and then they would basically dress the model and identify the type of fold that they were drawing. That's a pipe fold. If you did that for 5, 6, 7 weeks, you would be surprised how that knowledge would be retained in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'm not talking about trying to do a drawing that's beautiful, but a drawing, because none of these drawings I would say are beautiful. These are drawings to express a point. Then later on, you could do something like do a nice drapery study. A lot of people would do that. That's a very common thing to do drapery studies. You could set up a diaper fold. You could have somebody sit, have somebody move, take pictures, find a video of somebody doing something like running in a suit, and then slow motion it or freeze frame it and study what's going on. Draw the body underneath and then drape the figure on top of that.
Somebody had asked, and I can't find it now, but somebody asked, do any of these rules change if you're drawing digitally? But no, it doesn't.
Knowledge doesn't change across platform.
Oh yeah, Rob asked, is there a different approach if you're doing this digitally? I don't believe there would be.
No. I was trying to see if I could find something.
Guys, we're going to start wrapping up. Mike's going to pull a couple more bags out of his a couple bags out of his trick, a couple more tricks out of his bag,
a couple more trashes out of my bag.
But I encourage you. If you're just stumbling onto these every couple of days, why don't you, if you're watching this on Facebook, why don't you follow and like us on our Pencil to Pencil page on Facebook? When we have a new show get set up, you get an alert. If you're following us on YouTube, subscribe rather than wandering by every couple of days, and you can get alerts. So you can also, this is a great thing I like, Mike, having people preload their questions for us rather than waiting to the night of and hoping that you get on. Once you see us go into our calendar post, and the calendar post looks like, hey, this Wednesday at 8 o'clock, Pencil to Pencil goes live with blah, blah, blah. Right there in the comments.
He's my favorite.
Blah, blah, blah. I have all those issues.
Yes.
Type your questions, and they'll be there, and I'll see them when you're ready. All right, Mike, go ahead.
I was just trying to show a couple things here with drapery. So here is the last week I was drawing of the Phantom. So I have Katie laying in the bed there. So I drew her figure and kind of got it Greeked in what I wanted. And then I shot a picture of Mimi sort of doing the same pose. And then I took what I wanted from the photo of Mimi, which was mainly some sort of the foreshortening in this area of the waist, right? In there. But all these figures I did exactly, I'm not using photographs, right? I'm drawing the figure and then dressing the figure. The same thing in this series of those guys walking on the trail. All right. I drew the figure and then I dressed the figure. There's one here. Because I don't have the opportunity that I would like to be able to draw with photographs. Get a model or somebody to pose. I have to make that up. So here's a good example. So here's
the Phantom in disguise.
Giving somebody the business.
Give them some, right. And so I draw those figures, and then basically I dress them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Working on those principles of drapery and folds that I understand. I know how to do that well enough now to make it look convincing, even when I don't have. And what I showed you guys tonight, that's exactly. Here's another one. And again, this week was a lot of acting with just the women,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they're wearing T-shirts, and they're standing around outside. It's not it's not like cool jungles and stuff, but you want the clothes to fit. You don't want, and then we're much more critical of women's fashions than we are of men. Just like we're much more critical of what makes a pretty woman than a guy, right? The guys can get away with being kind of like bums. Here was another, the one at the bottom there. So again, I got to get those guys wearing their tactical vests and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Put in the drapery. So I look at you sort of study how that stuff gets built. But these are the same principles. You draw the figure, and then you dress the figure based upon these basic principles of anatomy. I mean, the anatomy and the anatomy of drapery. And like I said, if you really apply yourself, you'd be surprised what you could accomplish. I was so happy to see what the students were able to do after 5 or 6 weeks of doing that, because they understood, okay, this is what this kind of fold is going to happen. This kind of fold is going to happen.
Right.
And cartooning is really drawing from invention, right? And drawing from invention is stored knowledge. So the only way to store this knowledge is through practice. So like I said, the guys like Ditko or Wally Wood or Gil Kane, there were certain artists that were really, really good at being very systematic in how they constructed their figures and then how they dressed their figures. And somebody like Ditko really used like those 6 folds.
Mm-hmm. Oh no, did I lose Mike? Man, what a night. So the streaming gods are raging against us. I'm going to try to kick him out and see if he comes back. And yeah, JRD has got my wrap it up countdown. I think this will be my second one. It looks like Mike froze pretty well. Here he is. Let's see if we can get him back on. All right, Mike, you're back.
Yeah, I don't know if it's because Mimi is streaming Lightbox tonight. The internet is like, it's going, no. You're trying to you got your cell phone on, you got this other. I gotta call Comcast and say I need to up my.
Well, you need more gigawatts.
Yeah. They told me I had the fastest, but obviously they lied.
Yeah, liars.
So anyway, I hope that people understand. They're always free to email me some more.
And I will put your show business on the screen. If you ever have questions for Mike, you can email him, mike@actionplanet.com. And Mike is actually modeling one of the classic Action Planet T-shirts tonight.
This T-shirt is actually 20. No, it's over 20 years old. This is 1995. I got a bunch of them made up. So this is literally a vintage tee.
I think I'm still waiting on mine. I was like, Mike, are we friends now? Can I have an Action Planet shirt? And you're like, I don't
I
know.
don't know. Got to cut your thumb off. Sorry. Like the Yakuza.
That's right. So I want to give a quick blast to our sponsors on our way out the door. Pencil to Pencil is always brought to you by good friends at Graphicsly who make Clip Studio Paint, the cartoonist best friend. And also...
You're the cartoonist's best friend.
well, I am that. And also tomorrows.com. So, Mike, I want to give a plug for our guest for this Wednesday. Hopefully, it's crazy over there in the Pacific Northwest, but we have booked for Wednesday my good buddy and your good buddy and co-creator of Powers and Mice Templar, Mike Avon Oming. Big fans of Oming. Hopefully, the red skies over there will part and let Mike chat with us on Wednesday. But if not, we'll work it out and we'll have him on when it's safe.
Wasn't that like an '80s song?
What,
Skies at Night.
I think it was. Or I thought you were going to say Red Dawn with Patrick Swayze, where the Russians invaded Ohio or something like that.
Yeah, seeing all these like pictures the last couple of days, it looks like everybody's like posting their Blade Runner 2049 or Blade Runner.
It's wild, man.
Yeah, a lot of people are, a lot of friends of ours are basically waiting to hear whether they're gonna like any minute have to.
It's a run, run for the hill.
Yeah, and. You don't know whether when you come back, your house will be there.
That's scary stuff, man. Well, our heart goes out to all of our buddies and anybody else who's in harm's way. Please be safe. Stay safe. And JRD copied your quote down, Mike. You said, cartooning is drawing from stored knowledge. The only way to store that knowledge is to practice. I like that.
Yeah, I know a lot of young artists, you want to see if there's some trick, but I really, the only trick is practice. And if you like to practice, if you like to draw, then there's really, that's, you're doing what you like, And,
I was going to say one thing before we kick out. I was thinking about your run on the Phantom and how if the people who were drawing this strip all these years, and you especially weren't such accomplished artist to handle the human form, like would that work? Like, could they get somebody who wasn't really good at drawing musculature in the human form to do a good Phantom strip?
Well, the thing is with a strip like the Phantom is you can't just be good at drawing the Phantom. You have to be good at drawing that's a strip where you have to be good at drawing everything, because you have to draw horses and all kinds of animals, jungle environments, guys in military gear. Suddenly I'm drawing airplanes and military bases.
Yeah.
And I really get put through the paces on this strip. And you have to draw all the stuff that's hard.
Right.
Like
easy.
Yeah. Like, it's easier to have a model pose with a gun than to draw a figure with a gun out of your head. You get a lot of foreshortening of guys with rifle. You can think of like, oh, that's a cool pose, just because you have the person in front of you, right? Mm-hmm. And then you have to draw it. Bang! You got to get it done, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that I really, I always loved the guys who did the strips, Al and Raymond and all those people. But actually having done it for more than a decade now, my appreciation of the amazing amount of hard work. I don't think anybody works harder than a newspaper cartoonist. Mm-hmm. Seriously, because you have to have 365 strips a year. And the guys who do realistic stuff, there's never
And
you know,
there's
I
no
don't get
cheat days.
I don't get 6 weeks of just like girls laying in bikinis on a beach, right? You know, I mean, I'm drawing. In the last year, I have drawn, him fighting a bunch of terrorists. You're having to draw different kinds of like this week. I'm having to draw the women having a discussion outside with the. And I'm having to draw a Mercedes convertible.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Next week, I might be drawing, a tramp steamer.
Yeah.
The week after that, I might be drawing a Hughes 500C helicopter. Now, I know a lot of people now, and I do try to use whatever photographic swipe I can find. And I know now that people have to, you can use Google SketchUp and stuff like that. Still, if you don't know how to draw, you're going to do a crappy drawing because you're going to trace it, and it's going to look traced. You can always tell when the person drew this part themselves and then stuck that other drawing on there. The trace just looks like crap.
Yeah.
Because the volumes won't be expressed properly. You won't actually understand what you're looking at. Right? You won't understand, like, oh, that was something was doing this or something that was doing that, right?
But you just stuck it on there, right? Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things I remember when I was sharing Al's studio, he did show me how to take a photograph and turn a photograph into a drawing. And because he used a lot of photo reference, a lot of which he shot himself. And he had that way of taking a photograph and turning it into an Al Williamson drawing. Just simply traced it. There's stuff that looks you accept as a photograph, but when you look at it as a drawing, it goes, oh, the head's too short, the arm's too
right. What's going on? Right.
Yeah, right. So he showed me how he worked to do that. So again, what I don't want is if I use swipe of a car, which is much easier to do. If I can find the car from exactly the right angle, then I could just take that and swipe that, which is what everybody did. But then sometimes you can't find it from that exactly right angle.
Right.
Or it's a little off, or you have to actually go ahead and draw it because you can't find it from that angle. So you have to find it from an angle that's close enough, and then you still gotta build it up. So the comic strips really were as far as having to draw everything, are the most demanding that I've ever done. And storyboarding was the most demanding as far as the amount of drawing. Drawing an issue of Spider-Man is easier.
You heard it here. True believers.
Very often would be easier because you're making up a lot of the stuff. It's a Marvel comic, so you have a lot more license to do stuff. You know, if you're drawing the Punisher, it's harder because you got to draw an accurate, or you should be drawing an accurate, M16 or M9, and it's like when those war books at DC when Kubert and especially Russ Heath would draw those tanks and airplanes. The stuff was so accurate,
down to the
you
rivet.
have to love drawing it. And you have to love drawing that stuff, or you won't do a good job.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's practice. It's hard because we always all are guilty of drawing what we only like to draw, but comic strips quickly beat you into submission. You will draw a horse, and like I feel like I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm good at drawing horses, but I'm not great at drawing horses because I don't draw them enough. So I draw them like a couple weeks ago. I drew horses, then I won't draw them for a while.
Right.
So
So
I always
you like those like that, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like I always feel like I want to draw horses better. If I probably took a couple of weeks and did nothing but draw horses,
Hmm.
you would kind of get over that hump.
Yeah.
Um, and you really have to do that. You have to sort of, at a certain point, it's like if your perspective is bad, you just got to take a couple of weeks and get over the hump. If your anatomy is bad, you got to take a couple of weeks,
Hmm.
whatever it takes to get over the hump. So,
And one of the greatest things I love about art and just getting better is that you can tell when you've improved. Sometimes that shows itself when there are things that you're struggling with. Then all of a sudden you just can do it.
that's what I call the aha moment.
I call it leveling up, but it's the same
Right.
thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Like the last time I tried to draw this, I totally sucked. This time, ding, something. Oh, I know how to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's coming. It's coming
Yeah,
out.
it's
Yeah.
coming.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the thing. If anyone is seriously devoted to learning and honest and puts the effort in, you will get better.
Yeah.
You can't help but it's rare. I mean, there are some people who just don't have it, right? But I think that anyone who is really motivated and can be honest with themselves should be able to improve. I think it's usually the person who's not honest with where they are. They can't really make progress, And I've had students like that who think that their work is way beyond where it actually is, and that is the worst thing for them because then they almost become impervious to learning because they're like, well, I already did that. I already learned that basic stuff. So,
I've been knew that.
yeah, and then it's like, yeah, but you were like not doing it right the whole time.
All right, let's take this home, Mike. I think this was a great boot camp. I will say, from looking at our spreadsheet, we're not going to have another boot camp for a while. We're booked solid up until the middle of October with guests. And like it's a cavalcade of stars. It's a murderer's row. It's a mad world of cartoonists and animators.
Mad world of murderers.
That's right. And I'm excited to have you guys along for the ride. So thank you guys again for spending your Saturday evening with us. For my best bud, Mike Manley, I'm Jamar Nicholas. This has been Pencil to Pencil. You know what to do next. Wash your hands, and then let's get a show of curvy hands. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.